What's up, everybody? It's Jason Wojo. I'm your host for the Life Inner Show, where we help people make more, work less, and create lives and businesses they love. I'm joined by my co-host, Polish Peter Kolot. What's up, bro?
Not much, man. What's up with you over there?
Not much, man. Getting ready to talk here with Nick Loper, the founder of Side Hustle Nation, man. I'm really excited for this. Here's a guy, and I found his website several years ago when I was looking for ideas to get out of my own job. And it was really inspirational, and I'm really excited we have him on the podcast, man. He talks about how to basically, what are side hustles? How do you choose a side hustle? What are some of the things you're going to look at to evaluate when it's time to leave your job? There's a lot of stuff in this episode.
Yeah, and I really liked speaking to him because one of the things that he brought up is, not only that about the definition of the hustle or what it is, but making sure that whatever you venture on is actually going to help you get to where you want to get to, right? I mean, if a lot of people who are going side hustle are people who are working for someone else and they want to get out of the job or whatever it is that they want to do. So this episode, I really like having a conversation about the ideas, how to start implementing those, how to figure out which idea to actually tackle on if you have like 20,000 different ideas, right? And you give a really cool strategy on that. So I'm really excited about this particular episode. So let's hustle up, man.
So if you're somebody who's looking now to make extra money, if you're somebody who's trying to get out of the job and figuring out how to make a living, this episode is for you. We're going to go jump right to the episode right now. Here's our interview with Nick Loper from Side Hustle Nation. Nick, what's up, man? Welcome to the Life Inner Show. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet, guys. Thanks for having me.
Man, I got to tell you, I've been following your site, and so for those of you guys who aren't aware, so Nick runs a site called SideHustleNation.com. This is a site I became aware of several years ago, and as its name kind of implies, it's about side hustling and the people kind of taking their own initiative and their own kind of financial destiny into their own hands and picking up and a number of reasons people hustle. But Nick, I'd love to hear from you. First of all, what prompted you to start this site and this mission and this journey that you've been on?
Oh man, it was my own entrepreneurial experience. So it was like building something on the side, low risk, in my spare time, and then enjoying or having the option to quit my job, which I think was very freeing. And it was very different from the narrative that I was hearing out of Silicon Valley, and where it's like an entrepreneur raises venture capital and they are going to, eventually go public or have this big exit. And it's like, I kind of just wanted a lifestyle business. And so it's like, I thought it was a more realistic way for most people to get started. So it was exciting to start to share that gospel. What really took off was not my moderately successful previous side business, but it was interviewing other people who had been there and done that as well. And in that sense, the podcast took off way faster than any of my own writings and ramblings did, because it was like people were genuinely curious, as I was, like, how did you make that happen? Like, how did that work? I was trying to reverse engineer some of those stories. It's been a blast.
Well, man, that's a great point. So now people are learning from you, and you've created a monster of a site with so much information and so many tools and resources. And now people are looking at you and being like, man, I want to do what he did. And, you interview these success stories. What was it that you felt wanted you to get out of your job? Like, what was it that you kind of like felt like you needed to have this control of your own life? Like, what was that?
The worst part for me was having to ask my boss for time off, like, hey, 2 months from down the road. And I didn't even get a lot of vacation at this corporate gig anyways, but it was like, hey, in a couple months, could I take maybe a Thursday and a Friday off? And he never said no. Like, it wasn't even that situation where he's like, no, I need you in the office at 8 o'clock. That wasn't the case, but it just felt humiliating in a way to be a quote grown up and have to ask somebody else. Like, you weren't in control of your own calendar.
And so what was your first, so did you start these side hustles while you still had your job?
Yeah, my first business outside of this job was a comparison shopping site for footwear, which kind of I understand dates me a little bit because comparison shopping is not what it once was, but how the site worked was it would pull in the catalogs from Zappos and Amazon and all these other footwear retailers, and it would tell you where you could find the best price on your next pair of shoes, and it would earn an affiliate commission when somebody went and bought through that site. And so that was the original side hustle. That was the vehicle that let me quit that corporate job, and really ran that for several years as my main focus before starting Side Hustle Nation and the podcast.
Gotcha, man. Well, and so today, I had seen on your website that you were involved in 15 different income streams right now. And then right before we started the podcast, you said you're down to 14. So there's 14, but you started from one, it sounds like. And so you scaled to these 14. So what was behind that motivation to expand those?
Well, I think relying on one source of income, and for most people, that's their day job, is an inherently risky place to be. Now, I also wouldn't recommend somebody start out and say, I'm going to have 14 different income streams. I would say simplify first, diversify second. And that means getting one thing off the ground, getting your first clients, customers, getting your first traffic or sales, like whatever that metric is in your specific business, focusing on that, growing that to a point where maybe you can remove some of your own hours or your day-to-day involvement, and then seeking to diversify. Like, how can I invest the cash flow from this thing into the next thing, or make that a little bit more passive? And that's the way that I've tried to approach it. And it's, if you're starting out on day one and staying like, okay, I'm going to try 14 different things, it's a recipe to get nowhere on any of them.
Man, I'll tell you, just as a side note, that's something that I had struggled with in the past quite a bit, like shiny object syndrome. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then what ends up happening is none of them actually work very well. And so I love that, dude. I love that advice, like simplify and then diversify. So you made the transition out of your job. You started off with one side hustle. Now you're up to 14. What is the general concerns or fears that people have around this? What are the objections they have? Because they might say, like, Nick, look at you, man. You're smart. You have all this experience. You can do this. But I don't see how this is possible for myself. Like, I don't even know where to start. Like, how do you address people that have those concerns?
Well, I think the biggest objections that I get are the time, money, and ideas objections. Like, I don't have time for this. I don't have enough money to get anything off the ground. And I have no idea what business I would start. Like, those are probably the big three that I hear. And then maybe the fourth is like, I've started, but now I need marketing and sales help, right? Like, and that's a far more exciting question to address. But we can talk about time management and productivity and, all that stuff. And I love to geek out on all that stuff. But the truth is, and maybe the determining factor here is we're all dealt the same 24 hours in a day. And my one friend who's got like 4 kids was like, pretty sure my 24 hours look a little bit differently than your 24 hours. And I will be the first to admit, like, having started this stuff pre-kids, I think was a huge advantage. Just that's going to be the fact of it. But still, you got your 24 hours. What you probably have the most control over are the bookends of your days. First thing in the morning, last thing before bed, when you're less likely to be in somewhat more control than in the middle, when you're putting out fires and you got other people's demands on your time. So if you're in that position, you can start to carve out 15 minutes here, half an hour here, right? And just make it a date with yourself, because I think that's the way you can really move something forward. It doesn't have to be a lot, but I think it helps tremendously if it is consistent. And that's kind of the time element of the equation. And you can start to think of, and I've done time audit, and you can use Excel, or you can use like a tool like Toggle or something. Like, where do your 24 hours go? If you're really diligent about it, you might find that you have more time than you think. On the money front, most of the businesses that I've started, I've gotten off the ground for less than $500. I don't think, especially today, that you need to spend an obscene amount of money to get something off the ground, unless it requires this huge capital investment. And even then, is there going to be a creative way to bootstrap it? Like, we talked to a guy who's like, I want to run this tour group thing, so I'm going to need a van. I'm going to need this. It's like, well, what if you could validate it what if you could pre-sell it and then go rent the van, right? Just, limit your exposure. You don't need to go buy a $30,000 vehicle for this. Like, hey, it's $100 for the day. Like, oh, okay. Just kind of shift your thinking on the money front. And this was actually really interesting. I just finished reading it's called This'll Never Work, like the Netflix story from like the co-founder of Netflix. And it was like in 1997, you didn't have the technology and tools that we have today. So like to get something off the ground, they needed a couple $1 million to hire a development team to build a website. There's no Squarespace, there's no WordPress, there's no nothing. And that was kind of a really interesting difference to draw between starting a business then versus starting a business today. And then on the ideas front, I'm sorry to report that there is no such thing as the perfect side hustle business idea. In fact, if you are waiting for that lightning bolt of inspiration, I think you're probably going to be disappointed, because when it strikes, at least when it has for me, those businesses have been almost too heavy for liftoff, too heavy to get off the ground. Like, I don't know the first next step to do this. Like, it's really like I wanted to build some virtual assistant plus personal shopper plus affiliate. And it was just like, it was so cool in my head, but I could never figure out how to get it done. There's some safety in having let another company or another individual validate that for you. And Noah Kagan gave the example on the podcast. It's like, how many dry cleaners are in your hometown? How many taco restaurants are in your hometown? It's like, if there's room for more than one here. They all have the same business model, more or less. So it was inspiring to think that you don't need this never before seen, curve jumping, innovative idea. You just need to, execute on it well.
Well, even on your website, you have a lot of ideas. Like you present, I think like one of your pages has whatever 99 ideas or 100 ideas for income, and you're constantly talking about different things, so people can head over there for more ideas as well. So I would also venture to say that sometimes you have two sides of that idea coin. One is like, I have too many ideas, I don't know which one to pick, and the other one is like, I can't think of anything. Which one is more common, do you see?
It's a good question. I definitely do get both. And I've been on both sides of the equation at various points over the last 10 or 15 years. The I don't have any ideas is probably the more common one, or they don't see an idea that either excites them enough to take action on, or that interests them enough, or that they have confidence to learn about. What we can talk about the idea thing, because I think this is really an interesting point, is a piece of common advice is to start a business and, do this introspection on, well, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? And I think that passion equation, at least for me, is kind of a stress inducing question. Like, well, I don't know. And then it's like, then I have to figure out somehow a way to turn that around into like a money-making scheme. There's in So Good, what's it called? Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. This is an early book by Cal Newport. And he talks about how passion tends, I'm messing this up. Passion tends to follow the work rather than the other way around. Meaning, if you find something that you're decent at, that you're good at, that you are okay, you kind of enjoy doing it, like you don't dread it, you find that the passion tends to follow. And I can say this from firsthand experience is 100% true, because like I was painting houses in college, had no quote passion for peeling paint off of walls and stuff. But after a couple of summers of doing it, you can't help but walk past, and look up under the eaves and say, oh, there's a paint job waiting to happen. Let me come by and give these guys an estimate this weekend. And the same thing with podcasting. Like, had no idea what I was getting into on the podcasting front. It took probably 5 or 6 years before I even called myself a podcaster. But over time, through practice, through doing the work, it's become something that I've become really passionate about.
Man, that is hugely interesting, and I think relieving for a lot of people, because one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is, not knowing what they're passionate about, and so they never get off the ground because they're stuck thinking about what they're passionate about, and they never figure out what they want to do. And what you kind of said, if I'm understanding correctly, is like, hey, find something that you're good at and find passion in that work. Find passion in being good at it, in developing a skill, in the creativity or whatever aspects of that you resonate with. And I think it's a very different way of looking at things.
Yeah,
Peter, do you have something you wanted to add there?
Finding I was looking over at Peter.
No, so I was going to ask you because, I mean, I think that's a really good point that you mentioned. I had the follow-up question because we talked about this idea. And let's say for someone who has on the other aspect, when there is like 15,000 different ideas, right? And you started 14 other side hustles. So do you have like criteria that you use when it comes to an idea? Which one do you use to go, okay, this is what I'm going to go after, right? Is there a criteria that you have?
There is, and if you are the over analytical type like me, what I've found helpful is this weighted decision matrix, which is a fancy word for spreadsheet in my case. But you've got yourself, 5 or 10 different criteria questions going down this spreadsheet. Like, how fast do I think I'm going to see results on this? How scalable is it? How sellable is it? How excited am I about this idea? Like, kind of questions like this, both internal and external questions, like evaluating this idea. And then across the top, you have your different ideas, idea 1, idea 2, idea 3. And you can kind of start to plug these in and assign them a number score, either 1 to 10. I've typically done like 1 to 4, like single, double, triple, home run type of thing. And then at the bottom, the beauty of this is it will spit out a number, and it'll be a quantifiable number. Now, the answers to your questions are probably highly subjective, but it's going to spit you out a number at the bottom, and you can say, this is the math says this one is the best. And the best part about this is if your gut says something else is what you really want to work on, then you can, go the coin toss route and go do that instead. But I think it's really telling to say like, okay, this is an interesting idea. And either that goes with what I have in my gut, or I still want to pursue this other project instead.
Yeah. Man, that's
I like
really cool.
I like that questions.
Yeah. Really, I think that's
sounds
a good approach.
Like Voyager's all over it now.
Oh, dude,
you'll be like on the spreadsheet, weren't you?
Dude, my spreadsheets have spreadsheets. So I love that because it seems like a really nice marriage between objectivity and subjectivity, and just kind of making sure both of them counterbalance each other, and you make sure that you have one that satisfies both of those parameters. That's awesome. Do most people, would you say in your experience, like they start a side hustle, and for most people, do you see that this is something they just continue because they want to, make a little extra money? Or do most people want to get out of their job and eventually this becomes, I guess it wouldn't be a side hustle, it'd be what's the word for a full-on hustle? Like, I don't know, it wouldn't be necessarily a side hustle, but it's their main thing, right? Like, do you see people like that are all, in all cases, or what do you see most people end up doing with this once they start down this road?
Yeah, it's funny. I see people on both sides who are like, I love my job. I have no plans to leave my job, yet I still want to pursue this because I want to exercise my skills and creativity, because I want to use my free time more productively, because I just enjoy the game of making more money, trying to build myself a little bit of a financial cushion. Like, all that stuff is awesome. And then you see other people who are like, I got to get out. Like, if I have to go to that cubicle one more time, I'm just going to shoot myself. So there's that full spectrum where I see a lot of people in this space. They're trying to figure out when is it okay to make the leap? And my answer for that typically has been when you have a track record of revenue, 6 months, 12 months, like whatever you're comfortable with, that is exceeding your monthly expenses. If you can build a side hustle up to that point where it pays your bills, like that's a really empowering place to be, because every day you walk into work, you're like, I can take it or leave it. Like, I'm one bad meeting away, if it ever goes south, like I don't need to be here. And that's a very powerful place to be, versus most people coming in like, I need this paycheck and I need it yesterday, So those are kind of the two sides that I see there.
Well, man, and on your site, you talked about something, I can't remember what you called it, but essentially you're saying, hey, you called it your side hustle snowball, right? That's where where you're looking at your expenses and then figuring out how you can make the money from your side hustles to cover your living expenses. And you mentioned, you talked about that a little bit. And so let's dive into that for a second. Like you mentioned lifestyle earlier on in the episode too. And it sounds like you having control of your time and doing the things that are most important to you, that's a big deal. Like that's a big driver for you that's gone down this road because quite frankly, like there's risks of staying at a job too. This image of job security is an illusion, but you made the jump. And so there was a reason for that. And so you really it wasn't just, the permission, but it sounds like you kind of just want to have control over your time and do the things that you love doing. Talk about that a little bit.
If I'm being honest, it was still a very scary leap to make to answer the question, like, can I, even if I have this track record of revenue, can I really cut my own paycheck? Like, I don't know. It was a weird thing. It was a weird conversation to have. And I think other people are maybe more eager to have it. Like I wasn't the person who necessarily hated that job. I just didn't see myself there long-term. And it was, it's like, well, it's as good a time as any. And it was, once I had that conversation with my boss, it was like this weight off my shoulders. So I think there's an element of personal freedom that definitely comes into it. But the last thing that you want is a second job that you hate. So it's got to be some, maybe not an undying passion, but at least something that you're interested in, or you can see yourself kind of growing into.
So listen, so how do you make that leap, right? You talked about, I was a little bit afraid to actually take that leap of faith, whether or not I can actually make that check for myself. So how you make that leap?
So I did some, revenue analysis, and I looked at the performance of the business over the last 6 or 12 months and said, okay, if I didn't have this paycheck from the corporate gig coming in, would I still be able to pay my bills? And the answer was yes. And the answer was even a more emphatic yes when I said, well, shoot, give it an extra 40, 50 hours a week to dedicate to it. Like, I can see the direct impact of my effort to the bottom line. And if I had more time to put in that effort, I think I could safely grow it to that day job salary and beyond.
I like that. Okay, cool. I have a follow-up question because there's been, as you're talking about this side hustle, the question that keeps coming up in my own head is the definition of hustle. Because I think there is a screwed up versions of what that definition of hustle means that's around the internet. So what's your definition of that? What's the definition of hustle?
Hustle to me is controlling what you can control. It comes from an old baseball coach of mine who said, look, you're going to have bad days at the plate. You're going to have bad days in the field, but hustle never slumps. Like it's this one element of your game that you can control. And that's your effort. There is there's a perhaps worthwhile backlash against, quote, hustle culture, rise and grind 24/7. Like maybe there's a season of your life for that. And I have probably scaled back from that a little bit myself, but it's, control what you can control in the time that you have versus just, taking life as it comes, I think is kind of the way that I try and frame it. Okay.
So are you more on like hustle and being intentional how you hustle, or more of like hustle, 24/7 kind of thing? Where are you at?
I'm more on the be intentional with how you're spending your time, because I don't think anybody can reasonably, work 18-hour days for any length of time and be a positive member of society at the end of that. It's just not sustainable. But there are ways to build a hustle mentality or a side hustle mentality into your days and weeks in a way that does work and is rewarding for you.
Okay. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that people make when they do the side hustle? When they go into and do a side hustle, what's the biggest mistakes they make?
The mistakes that I see kind of cropping up over and over again are, this failure to launch. This is like, well, I have an idea, but I am kind of waiting for this either permission or perfection to put it out into the world. So the folks, in contrast, the ones that I see having success are the ones who kind of treat it like an experiment, where it's like, okay, I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to see what happens and kind of adjust course. Like we did an episode, I want to say almost 2 years ago now, with someone who had built a cool location independent consulting business, kind of piggybacking on the popularity of different software products. Like he was an early adopter of Asana, early adopter of Pipedrive. And so he started making YouTube videos like, here's how to do such and such in Asana. And that's how he would introduce the videos. Hey, I'm Paul, I'm an Asana consultant. And here's how to do, fill in the blank keyword dense, YouTube search engine in Asana. And he'd go out and explain it. And again, at the end of the video, like, hey, if you want to work with me, I'm available for consulting, here's my link. And through that, he's able to build up this like multi-$1,000 a month business, quit his day job, travel back when travel was a thing. But it was really cool. And I thought it was a really repeatable formula because there's new software products coming on board all the time. Anybody could easily replicate this. And in the time since that episode aired, like I've sent it to a few people like, hey, you are an early adopter of this software that I never heard of. Just do this, right? And it's been surprising to see the pushback on that. Like, well, I don't have my website. Like I need to design a logo for it. It's like, just start putting stuff out there. People will contact you. They will want to work with you.
Dude, that is huge. Let's pause there for a second. Like that's something that we see a lot of as well. Like they, so we do, for instance, a lot of our students are real estate investors, and they'll, instead of going out and trying to find a deal, they'll be like, well, I need my logo. No, I need my business cards. I need my SEO set up. I have to get my LLC, and it's like all these things.
I need to learn how to all this stuff. Yep.
Failure to launch, man. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Probably a lot of fear behind that too. Like, what if it fails? Like, what if? So I guess there's probably a lot of things that hold people up. Anything else you see people make common mistakes on?
I mean, common mistakes, maybe the lack of telling people what you do, especially if you're in a service-based business. And maybe there's a post on Facebook that says, hey, I'm accepting clients for web design work or something like that. And that's great. That's better than nothing. But it's like, if you could be even more specific about that, like I'm doing web design for real estate agents. And there's an understandable fear there. Like, what if it fails? What if I get judged by my peers and colleagues? Like, are you not making enough? Like, why do you need this side hustle? Like, so there's a lot of personal hangups there. But if you can be, intentional about telling people what you do, it makes it easier to tap into what I call your network. Like you're not necessarily trying to sell to your friends, network marketing style, but you are interested in everybody that they know, and you want them to know what you do in case an occasion comes up to refer somebody to you. And I do this all the time, like with some friends of mine who are very intentional about like, hey, I do paid search marketing. And so anytime somebody says like, oh, I need a Facebook ads person or I need a Google ads person, it's like, well, I got two people who are always top of my mind because they were very clear on what they did and who they did it for. And so I think if you can do that, you set yourself up for some positive referrals and word of mouth down the road.
Man, I love that. I think that's a great idea because I think a lot of us, we get stopped and trying to make sure that, we don't sound weird, or we don't, make sure that we look good, or we don't look bad, and so we don't say out there what we do and who we are and how we operate, right? So that little tip that you just shared with it, I mean, I think there's a lot of business that comes from just doing that and speaking up and talking about it. I got a follow-up question to you because we talked about mistakes what other people make. I want to ask you, because you've been doing this for a very long time, right? Many moons, right? So what would you tell your
kids in the picture?
What's that?
There were no kids in the picture. Like I was at a very different point in my life when the show started, for sure.
Right. So based on what you know right now of all the experiences that you've experienced with the growth and how you got all these different side hustles and everything, what would you tell your younger yourself if you could go back in time and say, hey, listen, this is what I would do if I were you?
Oh my gosh, I think I could accelerate things quite a bit knowing what I know now. On the podcast front, I would try and figure out a way to convert listeners into subscribers much earlier on. It took me probably 14 months to recognize that the show was not a business in itself, but it could still be a marketing channel for the business. And it probably didn't help that starting out, I had no idea, like, oh, what's the business model here? How's this eventually going to make money? I don't know. It's just something that I want to do. In any case, 14 months into the show, started creating these episode specific lead magnets. That was like, hey, you're out walking the dog, you're at the gym, you're driving, not in a great place to take notes. Meanwhile, our guest is dropping all sorts of juicy nuggets of information and, step-by-step ideas. Don't worry, we took notes for you. You can go download those here at sidehustlenation.com/whatever. And so 14 months in, had an email list of about 1,000 people. Within 3 months of implementing this strategy, it was 3,000. Within 6 months, it was 6,000. Within 12 months, it was 12,000. It was this, pretty serious inflection point for the business that surprisingly didn't really hurt listenership. All of a sudden, it gave people, now that I was in their inboxes, it took this very anonymous medium where people are tuning in, but you have no idea, or analytics on like who they are, where they are. Now all of a sudden you can have email conversations. It's something that they can easily forward to friends, family, neighbors. And that was, and now I can let them know about the latest episode. By the way, here's the next thing that's coming out. So I think that kind of fostered some growth there. On the blog front, or on the content discovery front, I wrote myself blue in the face early on, creating. I didn't really consider them like fluff posts at the time, but looking back, they kind of were, where there were these, more personal journey type of posts where, there was no hope of being discovered in any sort of user to content discovery platform, be it YouTube, Google, Pinterest, where people are like actively looking for information. It was more like, if you happen to be one of the 13 people who were subscribed to the blog, you would see that and be like, oh, okay, I'm building a relationship with Nick. Fine. And it's hard because no, personal finance blogger can't really come out of the gate with, Wealthfront versus Betterment as, it's like, okay, I know your game. You're just playing for SEO. So there's a balance here between being a personal journal and this made for search engine discovery type of content. But I think I could accelerate that curve a little bit faster by focusing on like how, just answering the question, how's anybody going to find this? And if you can answer that and be intentional about that, I think you'll accelerate the growth of your platform.
Wow, I love that answer. Bojo?
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm just curious. How has your personal life shifted as a result of you being, essentially self-employed? I mean, I'm curious about your everything from like how have you changed your expenses and your lifestyle versus how you spend your time now that you have this control. Like, do you have a hard time turning it off at the end of the day? Because, this is something, especially for people that work for themselves, sometimes, their office, like my office is right across the hallway. So it's real easy for me to come in here and start cranking something out. Tell us how some of this has evolved for you.
That has been a challenge. So we're in a 2-bedroom place. And so I have one workstation in the living room and one workstation. So we're here in our bedroom, right? Corner of our bedroom up here now. I don't know if I made the bed. No, bed isn't made. Okay. So it's separating work from the rest of your life has been a challenge for me. But I've been working from home for the last 12 and a half years. So I don't have really a problem like, focusing when it's time to focus. The pandemic and the closure of the preschool has created some other challenges, although the kids are back a couple of days a week for in-person preschool right now, which is now gives me a couple of days a week to focus on this stuff. And so it's been a challenge trying to balance the work and parenting duties with my wife during this time, because she's still working full time as well, or trying to, and we're figuring it out. We're getting it done. Things could definitely be worse because we're very grateful to be able to work from home and still make a living. And the bigger issue is not the hours in the day. It's more like there's all these other projects that I would love to tackle if there's time. And so it's been a cool exercise in prioritization. Like, well, if you only have a couple days a week plus, maybe a toddler nap time, if you're lucky, to get this done, what are you gonna work on?
Got it. Yeah.
I just heard the preschool side hustle idea. Preschool side hustle idea.
Start them young.
Start 'em. It's funny. I was looking up, so I'll do a Thanksgiving episode on 10 creative side hustles that make real money. And one thing that came across my radar as a result of the pandemic was virtual babysitting. It's like you can hire a Zoom babysitter to come and entertain your kids, and they'll do magic tricks or they'll tell stories. I was like, this is fascinating.
Wow.
This never would have existed a year ago.
That is wild.
So wait a minute, like the babysitter is on the other side of the screen. She just zooms to the kid in front of the TV. I mean, in front of the computer.
Yeah.
Hey, get back here. I see you. That's wild, man. That is wild.
That is crazy.
I guess, listen, that's just, I mean, we're laughing here, but this is just a perfect example of human ingenuity and creativity, taking advantage of a circumstance or an environment and doing something with it, man.
So listen, I got a follow-up question to this. From all your experience, what are some of the craziest business ideas that you've seen implemented, or in craziest businesses you've seen out there?
Crazy random businesses. Oh my gosh, I love this stuff. The virtual babysitting is probably up there. We did a profile on a guy who basically started, a lemonade stand for grownups. Started as on the side from his bartending gig, and ultimately worked his way into festivals like Bonnaroo, like Coachella, where he's selling $9 lemonade. It was like, okay, so you take this lemonade stand idea and here's what it would look like on steroids. I think a 7-figure business. It was like pretty crazy. We did a profile on a guy who makes a full-time living cleaning up parking lots. Like, hey, I'll contract with the property management companies and do litter removal. We had another woman who was doing $1,000 a week in dog poop pickup, like pooper scooper business. What was incredible, but that was like recurring weekly customers. Hey, $15 a week. I'll come back week after week after week. As long as that dog is still there, you're going to have this problem. And I'm here to take care of it, an affordable luxury in the days of really limited time on the part of parents and homeowners. Like, hey, I'm outsourcing more and more. And this was one of them. So stories like that, that hit home. We had a guy, the party rental stuff is not super relevant right now as people aren't really gathering. But there's another one who used YouTube as kind of the top of the funnel. And he had experience in growing and selling microgreens, which are apparently, like, he was very excited about them, apparently like very nutrient dense plants that mature like in a week's time. So you can like grow a batch and then they grow really quickly versus waiting all summer for these tomatoes to ripen. And what he did was kind of like this over the shoulder video of his setup in the garage and kind of like time lapse of here's how I plant the things and here's how they grow and here's how I package them up. And if you want to learn more, head over to my website and download the free microgreens quick start guide or something. And what ended up happening was once you opt in for that, you get this email series that eventually sells you on this full course, which I think was like a $500 course, maybe $400 or $500 on like how to start a microgreens business, where it was like primarily, and he was doing like 40 or 50 grand a month worth of this business and helping people start these operations. Hey, go sell it to restaurants, go sell it at the farmer's market, go sell home delivery during COVID. And it was really interesting because it was such a simple setup with the YouTube content at the top of the funnel and it was just like clockwork how this would come in. And so that kind of got me inspired on the whole YouTube thing, where it's like you don't need to be blogging or podcasting for years in some cases to try and quote build an audience. If you can hit the search engines right and just have a compelling offer and lead magnet, it was his ticket to a financial independence fast track for sure.
Man, that is wild. As I'm sitting here listening to all these different things, I wonder if you're in the position where you've seen so many things succeed that on surface level you may say, I'm not sure if that one's going to work or not. That when somebody comes to you and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, you must like at some point you must be like, just do it, trust me. Like there's no excuses like this. You just got to do this, make it happen. I've seen it so many times. Like it's amazing, man. I think I love what you're doing. I think it's something that people, it gives people hope. It gives them ideas. It gives them encouragement. It gives them in quite a lot of ways a model to follow, and they can learn quite a bit about what other people have done to be successful. Is there any kind of last advice you'd give our listeners as they are embarking on this journey?
Well, it has been fascinating. Thank you guys for having me. Like, I had no idea this was, I had no idea that there were this many different, creative money-making ideas out there, but there are opportunities behind every corner. It really is exciting to see that. And then to try and reverse engineer, like, okay, if I were to do that myself, how would that work? I mean, the biggest thing is one we already talked about was this experimenter's mindset, approaching everything as a scientist and saying, okay, I'm going to test this out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, okay, what did I learn from that? Rather than if it works, great. If it doesn't work, I'm a horrible failure and I should never try anything entrepreneurial ever again. Which I think it's easy to get scarred because failure sucks. Failure hurts. It's not a lot of fun. But if you can position it instead as an experiment, like, oh, hey, I'm going to make this low risk bet and hopefully something good happens from it. But if not, okay, what did I learn for the next thing? I mean, that's probably the biggest thing for people trying to get off the sidelines and into the game.
Love it, man. So sidehustlenation.com. You also have the podcast. Is there anywhere else you'd like people to go to learn more about what you do and who you are?
If you are on that side of the idea fence where you find yourself saying, I could use an idea, Jason, you mentioned it, sidehustlenation.com/ideas is a good place to start with, I think over 100 on this list now. My hope is by the end of that page, you've got, 8 or 10 different browser tabs open saying like, that looks interesting. I want to learn more about that. I think I could do that too. That's a great place to get those creative juices flowing.
Love it, man. Thank you so much for your time. I cannot wait to see what kind of people are motivated, inspired, and just run with this. And they're going to be future podcast guests for you as a success story that you inspired, man. Thanks for being on the show, Nick.
I love it. You bet. Thank you.
Man, dude, that was awesome. Like, what great advice for people that are looking to start their own side hustle. There's so many gems we could dive in here. What are some of the favorite things you took away from this?
Well, one of the biggest things I took away from this is we human beings, man, we are such a creative people, man. When at the end of it, when he was talking about the different ideas that he came across from people, like one lady was doing the dog pooping business, right? Another one is, all those kinds of ideas are so powerful, just a matter of actually implementing, right? Because think about it. You walk around throughout the day and you see poop, poop, poop. And she's the one who said, okay, let's do something about it.
Yeah.
And she went and took action. All of a sudden now she's got $1,000 a week business.
Well, that's a huge lesson,
so
man.
That's the biggest takeaway that I got.
That is a huge lesson. You talked about failure to launch. Like, how many of us wait till it's perfect and we never do anything, right? Or we prioritize all the minuscule things that have to happen before that big thing, And so I love what he said there. Just do it. And he also talked about, I thought it was really interesting. He talked about, the passion versus choice, dilemma that a lot of people have.
Right.
That's pretty powerful as well. Like, so if someone were to go over to his website and go through these 100 ideas that he has listed, some of those are going to inspire you, others aren't. But maybe it's just a matter of just getting into it and giving it a shot and seeing if you enjoy it, rather than spending an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out what you're passionate about. I think there's people on both sides of that equation. But the truth is, either way, I'll tell you, many times you don't even know if you're going to enjoy it until you try it, which reinforces his point of launching, right? Getting that off the ground. Right. I thought that was awesome. I also really liked his kind of idea of like, hey, I don't remember exactly what he called it, this comparison matrix for potential ideas to investigate, because he said, don't start with 14 or 15 different side hustles. Nothing's going to happen. That's good. Start off with, 1 or 2 and use this decision-making tool to give a weight to these different questions he mentioned, which I thought were great questions. Is it scalable?
Yeah.
A number of questions that he mentioned there. And so I like that objectivity as well.
Well, you just like that idea because he was talking about spreadsheets.
I do. I have a relationship with spreadsheets. I do.
Love it. But you know what? On the serious side of things, one of the things that just popped into my head as we're talking, right? And the criteria, because he talks about the criteria from this, what you just talked about, right?
Yeah.
I think for us life owners, if you're listening to the Life Owner show here, obviously you're listening to it because you're hearing me talk. What I would say is one additional thing that I would add to that criteria is ask yourself, does this idea align with my vision? Is that idea going to be aligning with my vision? Because I think, if I'm going to do a side hustle, why not, if I have all these different ideas, why not do a side hustle that's actually going to help me, right? Not just for the sake of it doing it to get out of the job or whatever it might be, but do a side hustle that's actually going to be aligning with my vision or something that's going to get me closer to the vision, that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is like, yes, you could choose a side hustle to get out of your job, but if you're going to do that, why not choose one that's going to get you closer to your vision rather than further away? And so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man.
Of course, I said it. Hello, it makes a lot of sense. Duh. Listeners already know that here. That's awesome. Not cutting out. You're not cutting that part out, by the way. That stays in.
Let's cut that part out right there.
I don't think so.
Well, listen, man. Awesome episode. A lot to take away from this. A lot of insights and nuggets. And Nick is a guy who's talked with a lot of people that have made a lot of different business ideas work and provided a lot of freedom for them. And so this is something that I think everyone should really consider. If you're in a position where perhaps you want to quit your job, but you're not sure how, start doing that research now. If the itch is there, maybe this is where you need to start looking. Check out his podcast, and just start learning as much as you can, and don't get stuck there though. Actually implement, do something, take action, and launch. Right. So. Listen, hope you enjoyed this episode. We enjoyed doing this. Thank you for your time, for your attention. We're very grateful and humbled that you would take your time to listen here. If you enjoyed it, we'd love to hear a review or subscribe or give us a rating. You can do that wherever you download your podcast. Also, if you want to join the Life Inner community, get in on the conversations that are happening, the discussions, and get to meet other people that are life-minded, meaning that we focus on business, but everything goes through the filter of life first. Go head on over to our Life Inner app. It is free. You can find that at lifeinner.com/app and download it on your mobile device or check out the desktop version. Also, we have a fast start kit for you over there as a free gift for you to start on your Life Inner journey. As always, thank you for listening. And until next time, live free.